And next up, we have a panel on data management and how to unlock the true power of your data in 5 steps. So can I welcome to the stage Harjreet Singh, Senior Director, Marketing and DG Operations at Finastra. His fun fact, he was nominated to be for a National Young Scientist Award in India, where he designed a great piece of hardware. Also, Katy, Meade, Data Analytics and Experience Lead at Make-A-Wish UK, who loves open water swimming and swimming in her local lake all year round. God, in this weather, that must be right. And Roy Robinson, Chief Product Officer at Mention Me, who was fortunate enough to meet Barack and Michelle Obama through a cross-community charity work involved in Belfast. So amazing. I'm sure you've got some great stories as a result of that. And I'm handing over to you, I believe, Roy.
Excellent. So if you want to think what this panel is going to be like, if you think about the Piers Morgan interview with Ronaldo, but with data instead of football, that's what we're going to try and achieve. Maybe not as controversial, but what we're going to try and do. It's been a really quiet few years for marketers over the past few years, hasn't it? Everything's been pretty boring. It's been so easy to do your job. Yeah, a lot of smiles there. But if you think about a couple of years ago, whenever COVID hit, the unexpected nature of what was going to happen next, everybody piled online. The prices for paid social and for paid search were really low. It was brilliant. Couldn't get enough customers through your digital doorway at that stage. And then obviously it kind of peaked off and it changed a bit. All the prices started spiraling again on the social side of things. Trust kind of was diving for social advertising and for paid search as well. And then obviously we've come in now to a recession just to double things up. And we've already chatted this morning about the fact that budgets are really under pressure for marketing teams. They're either being frozen. Some are lucky enough that maybe getting a bit more investment, but it's trying to prove that value, as the last speaker was saying before last, how you prove that value continually to be seen not as a cost center, but as something that brings benefit to the businesses. And it's interesting that Forrester had a report for CMOs just quite recently that says that they analysed the past 4 downturns, and they said that between 6 and 9% of businesses will come out stronger after a downturn. And the key to that was to cut fat, not operating muscle. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the importance of data, especially when we look at the previous speaker talked about cookie-geddon is coming upon us pretty quick. Third-party cookies will soon be gone. So how do you unlock the power of your data? Considering your budgets are under pressure, but why should you invest in it now? How can you make sure that your business and your leadership understand the value of that and why it's important for every brand? But before we do, we have a poll question. So what is the biggest issue you have with data? What's the single biggest issue you have with data? And we're going to come back to this just in a few moments. So this is supposed to be in 5 steps, but being we love data, we're going to give you 6 steps. So we're starting off with step 0. So step 0 is how do you set up for success? So Katy, maybe I could bring that along to you before we even look at a line of data. How can you set up for success?
I think we've talked about having data first in your Martech stack, which is really important, but kind of coming from a charity, that can be really, really challenging. We have super tight budgets. As at Make-A-Wish, we all have the privilege of, as well as our day jobs, speaking to our beneficiaries and doing what we call our wish discoveries, talking to our wish children to find out what their wishes might be. And nothing kind of focuses the mind more clearly than if you've just spoken to a 5-year-old boy who might have 6 months to live, and then going away and actually kind of thinking, I'm going to spend huge sums of money on something that's going into our tech stack. So it's balancing the short-term need to kind of actually get income kind of through the doors right now, and kind of having the tech stack that's going to set us up for success.
Brilliant, thanks. And Harjreet?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question to start with. For people who don't know, Finastra is a fintech, so we do software for the banks. So obviously we have lots and lots of data. And it's obviously regulated. There are a lot of privacy policies, secrecy and auditability and blah, blah, blah. When it comes to, we from marketing operations or demand gen operations, one of the first things we do is try and find out what the stakeholders are looking for. That's key. Sitting in data, sitting in the tech stack, often the intention is to throw up a lot of data. Whereas if you look at the stakeholders' demands, what are they looking for, and try and meet that with outcome-based reporting, outcome-based data, rather than what a lot of marketing do is activity-based reporting. I think that's probably how marketing can show a lot of value, and that's how we set up as well.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that I mentioned we work with about 500 brands, e-com brands, and what we've tried to help them to understand is it's really important that you start with the question. What question are you trying to answer? And in the end, that's what the data is for. It's to give us an answer, but you have to know what the question is. And any team across the business can think of questions they want to answer with data. And if you can help your teams to understand that you don't have to be a data scientist or a data engineer to care about data, especially in the marketing team, what's the most important questions you can ask and answer about a customer? Are they ready to purchase at that moment in time? Are they ready to be a brand advocate? Are they ready to leave you a review? Are they ready to make a second purchase? All of those questions can be answered by data, but it's important that every single team is helped to start and think this way, to have workshops, to associate and understand what the possibilities of data are, because then everybody gets excited about it, and it's amazing where questions can come from at that point. And I think the other thing that we talked about previously and you've touched on as well, Katy, is that whenever you are adding to your Martech stack, it's really important you think about how connected is this tool. What kind of shape is the data in? Is it going to make it easy for our data analysts or data scientists who have them to be able to use that data? Because the fact is that 80% of a data scientist's time is spent wrangling data. 20% is spent getting the value out of it. So it's really important that you start off with those questions. So that's how we set up for success. Let's go back to the poll results. And it's not on my screen. So who would work with technology? Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, so data is siloed is the biggest one. There's not a doubt there. That's not a big surprise. And what about yourself, Harjreet? Any of those that seem surprising to you?
I mean, I probably would have chosen the last one, but there is too much data. But that's where I come from. But you're right, absolutely right. I mean, data is siloed. I mean, often what we do is, and we as well, when we buy any equipment, we look at one of the three things, or basically all three things together, actually. One is it should mean business, so it drives customer experience, better customer experience. Second is operational efficiency, and third should be able to provide data or insights rather than data. Yeah. But because every system is throwing up so much data, I mean, we get too much, even if it is siloed, but too much information all over the place. So yeah, I mean, between one and probably the last one, that's where my vote would be somewhere.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah,
too much data.
Data silos is a heartbreaker. So let's get on and talk about the 5 points that hopefully are going to help you going forward. So we have this first step then, data definition. What are you trying to show and how do you define that? So have you any practical examples about how you go about defining data? Harjreet, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a practical example. When I joined Finastra, for example, terms which were thrown around, reporting terms, were very similar as what I was reporting in the past as well. So very similar. But if you dig deep, there is a lot of variation with what people mean by that term. A simple one would be marketing influence. What is marketing influence? I mean, every company has a different definition. There's no standard definition. So it's probably a good idea to, before we start collecting the data, before we start reporting it, is to understand what is it that we're trying to do, and then create a definition, agree with the stakeholders on two things. One is, what do you mean? And second, where do you get the data from? What is the source of truth? I mean, gradually, even Finastra as well, we've started building a data lake. So there is some, I'd say, similarity of a uniformity of data collection, but yet you can create different flavors of data. So it's always a good idea to create a definition, and that's exactly what we did. Basically, for every terminology, everything that we report on, so we have both the actual functional or the stakeholder definition and where we get the data from. And that has helped quite significantly, because anybody who asks for it, we know exactly what we mean by it.
And Katy, what about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of my background is in fundraising and marketing in the charity sector, and I've recently moved into a more organisational wide role. So I've inherited kind of pots of data from other teams, and I'm currently working with our volunteer team. We have an army of hundreds of volunteers around the country who help us deliver our work. And we were talking about our active volunteer base, and as it transpired, everybody in the room had a slightly different idea of what that meant. So I've been working with the team to create set definitions, the kind of methodology for kind of how we actually extract that data, so that actually from day one we're all talking about the same thing before we can then move forward and actually explore that data further.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And I think that we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think you were touching on it, Harjreet, as well. It's really important. Most data scientists and data teams will not be subject matter experts in marketing or in whatever they're being asked to answer. So it's really important early on that you have cross-functional workshops to try and, so they can even sit and observe as the marketing team are sitting talking about the problems that they have currently and understanding more about their customers or the consumers that visit their website or that visit the mobile app. So it's amazing what can happen with the alignment is whenever they're just sitting there and they have the opportunity then to ask questions, because once they have that, once data scientists or data engineers have that context, it makes it much easier for them to be much more proactive in coming back and saying, hey, did you mean this? Because we know there's going to be insights in the data that perhaps marketers wouldn't be aware of. But it needs to be a two-way conversation. They need to start, data scientists or data engineers need to start from somewhere. So if you can give them 30 or 40% of the picture, and they can start to see how marketing teams are thinking about the questions they need to answer, the most pressing problems they're trying to solve, then they can go away. And it's amazing how many times they'll come back and say, when they look at the data, they can come back and be proactive and say, actually, do you guys know that we can find out these other 3 or 4 things from the data? So it becomes a two-way conversation. And as we'll talk about later on then, that feedback loop is so important to be able to really get to the value point really quickly. And then once you have it that way, as you mentioned, it's about understanding where is the source of truth. Now, when businesses are quite small, it's quite easy. You maybe have a marketing automation tool, you have one place where you have your data, you may be handling your segmentation there. But as businesses start to grow, they start to amass much more technology. And it's very easy to take your eye off the ball, and all of a sudden when you go to try and do something with data, you're not actually sure where is the source of data. Is it my CDP? Is it my CRM? Is it some other tool perhaps that seems to be really accurate? Where are you doing your segmentation? Are you able to, if you build segments in one tool, are you able to use those throughout all of your communications, or does it all become really, really disparate in the way you're talking to your customers? Is it frustrating for them because the segmentation you're using perhaps to personalize on the website is different from your segmentation rules that you're using, maybe send out emails or to send out SMS messages. And so they're getting mixed messaging, your personalization strategies falling down, all because you haven't been able to think about where is the source of truth and how do I make sure that whenever I have a source of truth and my strategy is embedded there of how I'm going to talk to my customers or my consumers, that I can make sure the other tools can be aligned with that so that I'm not creating frustration for customers. Because we're all consumers here. And I don't know about you, but how frustrating it is because, Facebook and Google are walled gardens and it's very difficult to get much data out of them at all. And how frustrating it is with them because they're not connected into the rest of your Martech stack, where maybe you're running a lot of your other segmentation. I know I'm on Facebook and I've got artificial grass in my garden because I've got 2 young daughters. So I don't need to cut it, thank goodness, because I hate cutting grass. But I was searching for a lawnmower and trimmer for my mum and dad for their wedding anniversary or something like 6 months ago. And I got followed just around Facebook and everywhere else, and Google with ads for lawnmowers for about 4 months, going forward. It's just and that's only one example. Do you know what I mean? But how frustrating that is. And again, that shows the pitfalls of not having a linked up, connected ability to be able to match up where your data definition is, where your source of truth is, and where you want to use that going forward.
Can I give another example as well? I mean, one of the issues we faced in the past is to report on net new names, right, or new logos. And marketing obviously often is asked, what is the percentage of customer base or prospects that we got are net new names? I mean, it sounds so simple. Oh yeah, this is a new customer. But how do you define a new customer? Was the customer an ex-customer? How long do you wait for the ex-customer to become a new customer? And then when you are reporting on a new customer, is a new customer the same as a child level or as a parent level or as a grandparent level? So that's the reason why, I would say definitions absolutely clear cut so you know exactly what you're doing, and then you get a sync between before you start reporting and continuity as well going forward.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's move on with some more. So step 2, data discovery. Understanding where the data is and addressing one of the most pressing problems there, how to break down data silos. So Katy, maybe we'll start with you and get your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think this is really challenging. And to touch back on your point about where is that data? What's the single source of the truth? Actually, for us as an organisation, we were doing the doing before we kind of moved into kind of actually wanting to unlock the power of our data and do the analysis. So actually, we've got a lot of legacy systems strewn around. And in the charity sector, one of the most ubiquitous peer-to-peer fundraising platforms is a complete walled garden. We get very little data from there, but we have no choice. We can't kind of suddenly decide we're going to cut off and kind of not get the income from that. So it's a real challenge to kind of try and tie everything together. You throw into the mix the challenge that we've got really limited budgets, and yet we're trying to kind of not just be competitive against other charities, but actually in a market where people's budgets are squeezed kind of personally, and that competition to get donors to give rather than kind of buying essentials. And it means we have to be quite creative, and sometimes kind of stuff that looks shiny on the front end, we're kind of there with sellotape and string in the back end, kind of doing a lot of manual manipulation to try and kind of shoehorn things into a place where we can actually kind of run that analysis.
Excellent. No, that makes sense. And Harjreet?
I mean, in our case, data is really siloed. I mean, that's for sure. And also because I think Finastra has grown with M&A, and we're not unique. I think lots of companies do face that. We do have two marketers and two sales forces. So you can see the complexity we have. I mean, we are trying to merge, but because of the structure, the configuration is very different. It takes a long time. So what happens is, to report on any data, you have to really understand what is. So after the definition, now this is the next stage, and you must know what is the source of truth. Is it the marketing automation system? Is it the CRM? Is it the data lake? Is it some other tool? So the interest is to document all this. So for clarity's sake, we know exactly what we are. And often what we do is when we create a new report on Salesforce or any other tool as well, we do we do bookmark and we do list it. So everybody is following the same model. So even if the architecture of the tech stack is very siloed, a lot of data available, yet we get somewhat a sanity, somewhat a consistent reporting.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that, typically, it's very rarely we get to have a greenfield site. You go in and you've just, you pick your own marketing technology, you build your own data lake. It'd be a lovely world to be in. But typically, whenever we go into your roles, the technology stack is already existing. And as you say, it might be really old legacy systems, 10, 15 years old, especially in banks, obviously. There's a lot of old tech. Or they might have been in for a few years. But I think that's one of the most important exercises to do if you really want to start and leverage your data and unlock the power of data, is that piece that you talked about, is to have a directory of what data you have and stored where. Because once you have that, then that's going to be the basis for going forward and being able to allow you to move much faster. Now, that might take months to put together, to be able to understand where that data is, to make sure that it's mapped, what format it's in, where it's stored, is it available in real time, is it more batch orientated. But having that as that dictionary and keeping that data dictionary up to date is really key practical step to be able to have, and it's really worth investing that up front before you get involved in some data projects. But as we talked about before then, is making sure then that whenever you are investing in new technology for your marketing stack, is being forthright and asking the questions about what does your data schema look like? And it may be one of your teams asking that question. It might be in your IT department or someone who maybe has some experience. If you have data scientists, data engineers, and also how easy is it to be able to get data out and put data back in again if it's something which is customer facing or consumer facing. Because if you don't have or forthright with those, it might have the best UI and the best dashboards ever, but it's another one of those tools. It's isolated and siloed, and you have to log into it every day, as well as the 10 or 20 or 30 other tools you have to do as well to be able to get the insights or the benefit out of it. So again, it's about trying to combine all that together, and it's going to be much more important. We touched on the fact that third-party cookies by the end of next year will be gone. I think Chrome will finally kill it off at that point, and so it's really important that you start with these things now. First-party data is going to be the key to being successful going forward. And what I've seen talking to brands, unfortunately, is that it's a little bit like GDPR. It seems like a few years ago now, but you remember so many brands left it to the last minute, and they had to be pulling down websites and taking down pieces of the website because, oh hell, we left it too late to make sure we're GDPR compliant, and there was this massive panic at the end. Whereas other people were really prepared, and it was so smooth for them because they've been preparing for 12, 18 months. And that's the same thing whenever it comes down to the death of third-party cookies. It is going to happen because of the privacy regulations that's coming about, because of the mistrust there is from general consumers that are driving these changes. And so as marketing teams, we have every right to ask of the business, whether, if you have an IT team, whatever else, are we ready for this? Do we know where our first party data is? Do we know where our source of truth is? Those are all things we need to start and ask now, because the IT team, sorry if there's many IT teams here, but some IT teams will maybe get to next November, December, just before it happens, and say, oh, by the way, you're not going to be able to use your cookies anymore, and we haven't really quite figured out where your first party data is. Because they've maybe got a million other things they're trying to do, not because they're purposely doing it. So as marketing teams, because we're so involved in this and we need it to be successful, it's really important that you're asking those questions of your teams now to make sure that you can understand where it is, and you start to have that data dictionary, and you can start to look at how you break down the silos. And the other thing I would just say, just to finish this point off, is that going back to what we said at the start about setting the project up for success, if you talk about the questions you want to answer first, it enables you to be able to look selectively at the data you might need to answer those, because you might have 6 data silos. The temptation is to say, we'll build a data lake and put everything into it, and then we'll start to look at it. It might be that you only need 2 or 3 of those silos broken down to be able to answer the questions that your business is asking, that your marketing team is asking. So always, again, start with the questions, because it may simplify and shorten your time to value for what you need to be able to do. Okay, on to step 3. So data collection, so the practical data collection, normalizing, where's the sweet spots? And we're going to talk about, and the importance of experimentation and fail-fast approach. So Harjreet, let's talk about data normalizing, data collection. What's the secrets there that our audience can learn from?
Yeah, I mean, just in line with what we were discussing. So now that we have defined it, we know where it is. That's what we did in the previous steps. In a very agile methodology, I would say, is a much better idea to do some sort of a POC, some sort of a proof concept, share that information with the stakeholders, get their consent before it is widely circulated. And often you would find people did define something, but now that the data is showing something different, they would want to revise a bit. And often you would see that because the stakeholders obviously want to show, sometimes they do want to show a slightly different picture as well. I mean, to my example earlier, I was saying net new names, if the net new names with the previous definition were probably not reflected correctly, and you happen to be a company which part of the stock price or your investors are looking for net new names, you would want to do a bit of change. So it's always a good idea to do some sort of a POC, create some sort of a small group of people who would be friendly faces, who would be able to recommend, who would be able to see that, and then widely circulate once it's created. So data collecting, whether it's whatever the model is, whether it's in Excel's, whether it's in a Power BI or even a data lake, all of that is something which is absolutely required at this stage. So okay, the fields are properly mapped. We know exactly what data is flowing in. We have agreed to the definitions now, and that's where we go next. So create a small as a group, do a POC, and then think big.
Great advice. And Katy, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think kind of this step is really kind of inevitably where you will spend a lot of time. And if you have got kind of data sitting various silos, this can be a real headache. It's kind of like, definitely a particular pain point for us. I think it comes back to that kind of step 2, having your definitions being really clear up front what the questions are. We typically have to report to our kind of board of trustees who will come from kind of much bigger organisations from the commercial world. And there's nothing more frustrating than having kind of spent hours and hours and hours wrangling your data to be able to kind of run some analysis, and then somebody will ask a slightly different version of the question, or they'll want the data cut in a slightly different way, and you think, I have not prepared for that. So I think kind of making sure that you've got that clarity up front about what you're doing in that agreement, so that you're then able to collect the right data in the right way to run the analysis you need to run.
Yeah, excellent, thanks. And I think that we talked about fail fast or fail well, but fail early. I think that one of the things I wanted to say as well is, unless you've got unlimited budgets, which I don't think anybody has, you're always going to have limited resources for being able to, answer these questions. And we'll come back to kind of experimentation in a moment. But every marketing team has the right to demand of their Martech suppliers and ask the question is, what are you doing to help me to be more successful through data and through AI? Because ultimately, if they care about a brand, if they care about who they're working with, they care about their success, they're going to want to partner with them. And that might be something just as much as giving practical advice.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So why don't we do a workshop? Why don't we talk about the data you have? Maybe giving you guidance about how you kick off that data discovery piece, identifying where your source of truth is, but they should be able to give you practical advice because they should care about the data and the insights that you can glean from it behind that. But whenever you do then start the projects, just as you've both said, we've talked about getting cross-functional teams together right at the start, but whenever you're doing a data project, it's very important that it is very agile and you decide, basically break the whole project down in steps. So whatever the question is that you want to answer. So for example, let's say you wanted to, something that we've been answering and built models for is, it mentioned me, is someone ready to refer a friend at this moment in time or not? So the worst thing we could do is lock our data science team away in a room for 6 or 9 months and for them to come back with a black box and say, we've got an answer for you. Because how do you go and explain that worth? People say that we just want AI to work, but actually they don't really. They want to know how it works, even at a high level. So what we were able to do is work back from that first question, understand what's all the other questions that we want to ask. So for example, whenever we were looking at this is, have they made a purchase? Have we seen them before? Have they made multiple purchases? Have they left reviews? All of these other questions that we want to answer by data. And just try and take the POC far enough that you can go, yes, this is worth investing in for another couple of weeks or for another 2 sprints. That's always the way you should break it down, because if you do that, quite often, a lot of data projects will fail for one reason or another, not because maybe you're not smart enough, but maybe you don't have the data, for example. Or maybe it's just an impossible question to answer at this point in time, or maybe you don't have enough, you've maybe too much data to your point as well, and it's just going to take 3 years to answer this question, and that's okay. But it's okay if you fail early enough in the project, because I'm sure there'll be a list of 20 other things that you could be able to look at, or 30 things that you're able to look at other than this question. So try and set that with the teams. Try and have regular check-ins with your stakeholders. If that's the marketing team, who is going to be the one that's accountable for working and making sure that the data team has their answers? Who's the one that's going to be able to hold your Martech suppliers to account if they're not giving you that support to try start make more of your data? Are those Martech tools, are they already talking to you about the value of first-party data? Are they helping you to collect it in a really clean way that then you can use? Because it's your data in the end. So it is. So are they making it easy for you to access for that and to understand the value of it? Or is it locked away in a format which makes it almost impossible to use? So these are all the things that you want to be able to think about. And again, collecting data. I previously worked at Boxever, who was acquired by Sitecore. We built a CDP. And we were pretty young and naive. And the first thing we thought was, give us all the data. And we worked with some of the biggest airlines in the world and banks and Paddy Power and things like that. But for every company profile we had on a consumer or a customer, we had something like 3,500 data points, and it was all being processed in real time. We were one of AWS's biggest customers for data processing in Ireland. And you know what? I think we used 10% of that data.
Yeah.
And I learned a big lesson there. And so that's something, again, is that whenever you're looking at data collection is someone needs to be thinking about, do we need to use this? Will we need to use this? And it's okay if you think, what would be great if we had another data point. Okay, think about those things early. Think about what's your data projects, not just for 23, but for 24. And start to plan that far ahead. Look, in 24, do your workshops. We would love to answer this question. So then we need to start and collect that data today. And you're not getting to that point going, oh no, we don't have that data. We're going to have to wait for another year. So it's about that planning piece as well when it comes down to data collection, to make sure that you've got the right data in the right format. Because if you prepare far enough ahead, it's amazing how much you can accomplish and how agile that you can move going forward. So that's data collection. So we've been through setting the foundations. We've been through breaking down silos. We're looking at data collection. We've talked about the source of truth. So let's move on to the next one. So everybody's favorite subject, analytics. So how do you work out what you want to show and who you want to show it to? So Harjreet, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah. See, the last step is obviously answering the question what the stakeholders need. Now you have collected a lot of raw data. I would still call it raw data, whether it's from data lake, whether it's from systems, all of that stuff. So there is a gap between the raw data and what the presentation layer should be seeing. So this is where analytics comes in, and it is very important again to do I would say standardization on analytics, so you get the same answer every time. I mean, one example I'll give is it may sound very simple, is to report on engagement of personas by account. And when you dig deep, then you realize there's not one single truth. So you get some information from marketers, in our case, certainly it was, some information, like you said, from the cookies policy, some information from the CRM. We don't have a multi-attribution, we don't have visible or anything like that, so we literally are pretty much siloed. But to report something like that, you have to do a lot of analysis. You have to do mapping, you have to do deduping, you have to do, there are a few steps between all the raw data and the final layer. So this is where I would say analytics comes in. But the trick is not to do it, not to solve it in once and then forget about it. But basically, because all of the data that we do, especially marketing, has been, I would say, more known for creating custom reports and then forgetting about it. But what we do is, because obviously we are a lot more auditable company as well, we do mark every step that we have done to create the answer. So it becomes a consistent answer. Next time as well, you get the raw data, you get the steps, and you get the answer. So analytics for us is very, very important. The way we would take the steps, the way we would flag, the way we would dedupe is all standardized very much.
Yeah, excellent. And just before we come on to Katy, I think that there was a question earlier on, I can't remember which session it was, or which part of the session it was in, about how do you basically prove value to your CFO, or how do you go to be able to justify budget, what kind of KPIs do you use? And the fact is that for all marketing teams, one of the biggest problems is the ability to be able to show that value really quickly and really succinctly in a way that the budget holders will be able to understand. Because if you're going to your CFO, typically what's on their mind is they maybe need to go to the board of investors, or it could be a different board. They need to be able to have quickly to be able to prove that value as well. So that's why when we talk about analytics, you talk about with all this data, it's really important that your analytics is really to be able to be smart and be simple. What's your thoughts on this, Katy?
Yeah, I think kind of it's as much as the technical side, it's down to how you then communicate that back out to your key stakeholders on a day-to-day basis. I've said my background is more in marketing than the technical side of things, and I'm using those skills more. Probably I've got other people who do the kind of like the more technical stuff for me. And it's important to be able to kind of show the value of the work that you're doing, and actually kind of helping the teams that you're working with understand that. It's almost I try and drip feed things to people, so it's almost like gamifying how I'm kind of like delivering that insight to them. So give them quick wins, show them kind of quite early on kind of what benefit your insight is going to bring to them. And we talk a lot about actionable insights, but there is nothing more soul destroying than you have come out with this brilliant piece of insight, and then only to realise kind of 6 months later the team you've delivered it to are just kind of continuing as they were, and actually kind of you always need to do probably more than you think to be able to kind of get that over the line and really kind of drive change, and that's where the value in the work that you're doing kind of really comes from. So I think kind of that side of things is just as important as the technical side, especially when you're starting to look at the analytics.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. We talked previously about the agile POC kind of point of view. One of the first things you want to do when you build a POC, when you're being agile, is even show one key metric, and then be able to show how that's going to move the needle for the marketing team and for the business as a whole and add to their success. If you can prove one key metric, then your time is going to be worthwhile to be able to go on. You'll be able to get investment and move on from there as well. So let's move on to our last point. Is reporting and displaying meet stakeholder requirements. So I'll start with that one. So one of the things that we found I mentioned Meade, whenever it comes to reporting and displaying, is that it's trying to make sure that you're giving the standard metrics that typically CMOs and the boards care about, but as well as that, it's trying to show insights or slicing the data in a slightly different way that can really show different value to the business. One of the things, obviously, we're all about customer advocacy, and it can seem quite hard to measure. Most marketing teams are all about RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary. But we've been able to add into that a slice of showing how many people are brand advocates and are able to talk about that brand. Because somebody might not be the biggest spender with your brand, but actually they've referred 10, 20, 30, 40 people. and the value that they bring to the brand makes their money the most important. So that different, unique insight has really helped businesses like Puma that we work with to change completely how they think about their VIP program, to understand that their VIPs are not necessarily the people that spend the most, but actually those that talk about the brand the most, especially with trust falling in the likes of paid social and paid search at the moment as well. So it's trying to find something unique that can bring value to a business. Harjreet, what's your thoughts here?
I mean, I absolutely agree with you, no doubt about it. First, and to Katy's point, I mean, she mentioned the last time. So all of us marketeers, we do, I mean, some of us are lucky we have people who support us with data collection and data reporting. They're not marketeers. And their intention is to literally have a lot of data, try to create some sort of an answer and then present it. Sometimes we are the stakeholders, sometimes we are the ones who are using the data. Sometimes it's, I mean, like in your case, the board is, or you're getting to the investors as well. So the language is slightly different. The language I would speak is slightly different to what the data guy is speaking and what the stakeholders are actually looking for. And this is where reporting and displaying becomes very important, because you got to speak the language of the person who's or the group that is looking for the answer. And often that's where, and maybe sometimes it's documented, sometimes it's not as well, is to create the report more in a simplified form, simple, not too much information in there, and speak the language of the end user. That's where often I would say marketing does fall short as well. Trying to do, like, I mean, just an example, let's say, multi-touch attribution. How many of us as stakeholders ever understand what multi-touch attribution is? But if we keep all of this, I mean, very, very similar to all very simple devices always have a lot more complex background. That's exactly what I would always propagate. As in, a simple report for the stakeholder always would have a lot more behind it. So we, from the data, from the reporting, from the text side, we should look at making life simpler for the end user and more presentable, more, I'd say, outcome-based rather than activity. That's where we should be.
Excellent. And Katy, finally, you?
Yeah, I think it is. It's really down to kind of like knowing who your internal audience is and kind of communicating with them in the way that they need. I think kind of especially when you're working on the more technical side of things, it's kind of like, why do something really clever? It's like everybody needs to know like how clever and how difficult the thing is that I'm doing. Whereas actually that can kind of create that barrier between kind of you and kind of like other teams within the organisation. So it's actually kind of, using your marketing skills, thinking about how you communicate with people in a way that they're going to understand and also kind of delivers what they need. So you really need to kind of like understand your internal audiences to be able to kind of show them actually kind of what you've worked on is how it's going to benefit them and how it's going to help them kind of day to day and in the longer term, and kind of like help bridge that gap. I was thinking a little bit, it's like, I don't know if you know the magician's kind of Penn and Teller, where they kind of like, they bring the audience along with you, and it's kind of like, they make you feel like, I could do that illusion at home myself. They'll then always like wow you by doing something kind of like really big and shiny in a totally different way, but kind of, you want people to feel empowered and inspired by what you're doing. At Make-A-Wish, our brand values are to kind of be magical, inclusive and inspiring. And for me, that doesn't just kind of extend to the work we do with our beneficiaries. We try to bring that to life every day, kind of with the data team as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, time has flown. I see we've got some questions.
Yeah, we've got a lot of... Is this working? Yep. We've got a lot of questions. Fantastic discussion. We've probably got kind of only time for kind of one or two, and there's been a hive of activity. We're going to start with one that's kind of bubbled up quite nicely. Who owns data? Is it marketing? Is it IT? Is it technology? Is it product? I mean, is there an owner?
Yeah, so let me take it. Depends on the size of your organization. So it does. If you're a smaller organization, typically you want somebody that's basically almost like a shared resource. So what I've seen work even internally with us or our businesses is that you hire one data engineer typically. But what he has is then you maybe have a steering group that meets kind of every week to talk about, he would own mapping, doing all that data mapping and getting it in shape. But then that steering group would set priorities about who he should be helping to serve across the business, because data can obviously be used across anywhere. As organizations get bigger, typically there should be a central data team, typically under the CIO, perhaps, or if you have a chief data officer. But again, what should really happen there is if you're that size, marketing teams themselves should have their own marketing data engineers and data scientists that can help to serve them specifically. That would be my thoughts anyway. I don't know, Harjreet.
I mean, there's no simple answer to this, frankly. And this is where probably from our steps as well, the first step, definition, is very important. Who owns data? I would say marketing do create a lot of data, but we don't own the data. We own success of marketing, and marketing success is sales success. It's basically top line success. So it's not marketing, it is not IT, but it's a mix, I would say. We do own our own fates. We are often accused of hiding behind data. But I mean, my simple answer would be we don't own the data, we do own success for marketing. So data is a tool to prove that. Yeah.
Excellent. Any thoughts, Katy?
Yeah, I think there's kind of the difference between who owns the data, but then also who's responsible for it, because actually that's a collective responsibility. And especially if you're trying to understand how different parts of your organisation interplay with each other, that's got to be a shared responsibility.
Yeah, excellent.
Katy, this one's for you. If you were to make one data wish for the charity sector, what would it be?
Oh, goodness me, that's a hard one. I think being able to have the same sort of access and play on a level playing field, because what we found as a sector that actually that technological gap between the charity sector and kind of commercial sector is widening, and in challenging times financially, that's going to potentially put the sector at a disservice at a time when kind of people need us the most. So kind of working with kind of people's kind of CSR kind of programs and things like that is really important to us.
Great. And Harjreet, how do you balance kind of self-service for marketing teams when it comes to kind of using data, applying data, and governance of data?
Okay. I was looking at the highlighted question. Maybe that's a different one. You read a different one. But anyway, I'll come to the first one, the highlighted one. I mean, it's something which absolutely resonates with us. Why I say that is, I mean, we do look at our marketing strategy regularly. Probably, I would say, every couple of months, we do look at what we should be doing next quarter. And over the last 2-3 years, I mean, I'll give you an example. Over the last 2 years, obviously, as COVID struck, our go-to-market strategies or channels, as some people call it, like everybody else's, was changing. I mean, before that, I'd say about 40% of our decent leads would come via physical events. And suddenly, physical events don't exist. So what do? So what we constantly do is create a very simple picture of channels and what is the outcome at each stage. So how many leads came from that channel? What is the velocity of conversion between every stage and the next stage? And what is the success of, so what is the conversion ratio and what's the velocity at every stage? So on a simple dashboard, we are pretty much aware of the trends of changing of each of these channels. And that we use quite often to define I won't call it a long-term strategy, but certainly a strategy for the next quarter or a couple of quarters on which way we should be doing or which way we should be going for investment. Hybrid events, for example, or before that, webinars. All of this, we could at least see a trend before the trend became a real trend. And that did help. Sorry, there was another question.
And I will open this one up just in terms of kind of enabling self-service for marketing teams when it comes to kind of data governance, when it comes to kind of using that data for customer segmentation. I guess to the three of you, if you could answer very swiftly, in one sentence, kind of how would you go about that?
Yeah. I mean, in a very short way, I'll say so. Very simply putting, what we said at the end is, if you make the report, if you make the final outcome very simple to understand, people are less likely to make mistakes. Then you can have a self-service model. Otherwise, every time people go to what Katy was mentioning, the data guys, to have an answer, self-service would only work if the interface is very simple. And that's what we try to do. Make it simple, make it auditable, and then don't have changes frequently. So people do refer to the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, it's about enabling marketers in self-service is about what is every piece of data that we show going to help them to be better at their job or help them to understand their customers better? Or is it something which they don't actually need to know, which we can hide? So it's possible to mask some of the data, but have it available in the models and other parts of the calculations and algorithms that you're using, but then only be able to surface up to them in dashboards or in segmentation tools, actually the criteria and that they actually need to know to help them to do their job better. So I think it's about being very robust about those questions. Does this person need to have this piece of data to help them to do their job or not? If the answer is no, then it should always be hidden away and kept to a minimal amount of people that would have access to it.
And Katy?
Yeah, I think kind of our customers have kind of like a real breadth of relationships with us as an organisation. They might be beneficiaries, they might be fundraisers, they might be volunteers, and so it's always kind of about finding that balance between enabling us to have a 360-degree view of our stakeholders, whilst kind of not giving people too much access to the things they don't know. And I think it's thinking about kind of actually from the customer's point of view, what would they expect somebody to know about me when they come to the organisation, because you can go too far the other way as well and make it feel kind of impersonal, like we don't know them. So there's a weight of expectation on the customer part as well.
Great stuff. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but I think we could talk about this for hours. I know I could. So thank you to our panellists, and can you give them a big round of applause?
Thank you.